Joining me now with the breaking news of the day. Well, there's actually a lot of breaking news for the day, what's going on in Capitol Hill and more. But the breaking news internationally is the supposed ceasefire and hostage exchange deal in Israel with Hamas. Joining me tonight is a great panel. Dr. Andy Woods, expert on the Middle East, been there many times. Dr. Rob Linstead, he's been there about 75 times. Then we have the guy who actually lives there, our reporter on the ground, Aaron Lavarco, in Israel tonight. Born and raised in Egypt, an expert on Islam and Hamas, speaks fluent Arabic, and has translated the Quran into perfect English without the whitewashing. Usama Dakdok. I'll give all their websites if you want to get a paper or a pen. We might be joined a little bit later here by Shahram Hadian. Gentlemen, welcome back. I know I think all of you, other than Shahram, with me on radio today on our 74 terrestrial Christian stations and World YouTube here. But the story is moving so quickly. We wanted to bring an update as well as make sure that our TV audience got the full effect tonight on Brannon Howse Live. So thank you all for joining me. Aaron, let's go to you. What's the latest since we went off the air at 2 o'clock Central U.S. time? What's the latest in Israel tonight?
The latest is the big debate or question marks over whether this ceasefire is to be permanent or temporary. This is a huge issue. Now, based on Joe Biden's speech that we watched earlier, it's apparently permanent, but we are having members of our government, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, who are saying that if the fighting does not go back after this exchange of hostages and prisoners, then we will not remain in the government. So this is a huge issue, and it's not something that we're going to find out the answer to overnight. It's going to be something that's going to unfold as the days and weeks unfold, because this is a 42-day exchange, or actually it's almost 2 months. So this is going to be like pulling teeth over a very long time, this hostage exchange, and then seeing prisoners leaving and going home to celebrations. And then the last thing that I've just been watching since we talked earlier, I was watching a doctor who will deal with the hostages who come back home. And he basically was saying that the two major issues are the physical issue, and he said that shouldn't be a major problem, but he said it's the mental, and that is going to be a real challenge, especially if you base it off the hostages that were released after 2-3 months and then after 6 months. These people have been in captivity over 400 days. He said this is going to be a real difficult challenge on their hands. All right.
So the question, though, is what are you guys getting? Because we reported today that they're going to release like 50 hostages, terrorists. Israel's going to release like 50 terrorists for every one military person. So they got a deal for military people to get IDF soldiers out. Okay, here's one IDF guy. You're going to give us 50 of our terrorists. Here's one civilian. You're going to give us 30 terrorists. I mean, they're cutting deals like this. This, as I said today on radio, this sounds like a deal where you guys are basically giving them an opportunity to restock, resupply, and get more men on the ground. So, I pray you get your 30, 35 people back, but I'm afraid you're going to end up with maybe 300 dead when all's said and done, maybe more.
Brannon, we knew the cost. October the 8th, when we counted the numbers that had been kidnapped, we knew this is going to be a very costly war. And this is a big part of it. When you go back a number of years, about 9 years ago, we gave 1,300 prisoners for one soldier, Gilad Shalit. And, this is the ethical or the moral dilemma we have when it comes to human life and the value of human life. It's a it's a very painful situation to be put in.
No, I agree. It absolutely is. I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make the decision. But valuing human life has to be taken into context with releasing all these terrorists and giving them a chance to resupply. So you're going to get back 35, but at the end of the day, you're probably going to end up with several hundred, if not 1,000 or more dead. I mean, just on October 7th alone, you had 1,200 killed. So give us our 35. We'll give you these terrorists back so you guys can come back in here and kill another 2,000-3,000 Israelis.
I totally agree. In fact, one ex-member of our government, he was quoting the Oslo Peace Accords. He was quoting the Y Peace Accords, and he was going historically, trying to make peace with these kind of people, and the results and the deaths. He said, when you take that into consideration, then making this kind of deal is a mistake. And I agree. I'm not for it. They're not my children, or they're not my family in captivity. So it's a lot easier for me to say. Yeah. But I'm not for it myself.
Well, look at what was said between Senator Tom Cotton yesterday and in what looks to be the guy that's going to be confirmed to be the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. Listen to what they said.
Note that it's only the liberal critics that have disrupted this hearing. As was my custom during the Biden administration, I want to give you a chance to respond to what they said about you. I think the first one accused you of being a Christian Zionist. I'm not really sure why that is a bad thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Zionist. Zionism is that the Jewish people deserve a homeland in the ancient Holy Land where they've lived since the dawn of history. Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel and its existential defense, and the way America comes alongside them is a great ally.
Thank you. Because another protester, and I think this one was a member of Code Pink, which, by the way, is a Chinese Communist front group these days, said that you support Israel's war in Gaza. I support Israel's existential war in Gaza. I assume, like me and President Trump, you support that war as well, don't you?
Senator, I do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas.
Well, there you go. Usama, you weigh in here. You're born and raised in Egypt. You know the Quran. You know the Hadiths. You know Taqiyya, that these guys, the Islamists, can lie. As we discussed on radio today, the sad part is much of the world doesn't know the truth about Islam. So this deal is offered up to Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel. And to the world, it looks like a pretty good deal. Why don't you take it? And as we said on radio today, he's kind of forced to take it out of the ignorance of the world. Because if he doesn't, he looks like he's a warmonger, doesn't care, and doesn't want peace. Where I think you and I know that this is not going to end up well for Israel in the big picture. It may end up well in that they get some of their hostages back, and so that's a win, right? But at the end of the day, if you were to total it up, what is going to be the net gain or the net loss for Israel? I think you and I both agree that Netanyahu is being forced to take this on the international stage because of the ignorance of people around the world about the truth of Islam. Speak to that, please.
The world is looking for peace, and they're willing to compromise to have peace, when in reality, that's not a peace. That is a suicide mission for anybody to accept. I may give you a good example of that. Almost 9 years ago, my wife had cancer, and the cancer was in her tongue. So we went and did the surgery, and the doctor scraped some of the meat under the tongue. And then we sent it to the lab, the samples they cut off. They come back and said, no, we did not get all the cancer. There's still some cancer left under her tongue. So we have to go to a surgery the following morning to remove the rest of the cancer cell from under her tongue. That is the only way my wife survived and to live today, 9 years later, because cancer in the tongue is the worst cancer you can have. 6 months, the maximum people can live with cancer. Now, Hamas, like any other Muslim jihad organization, I don't care if they're in Syria, if they're in Lebanon, if they're Hezbollah or Al-Qaeda or Daesh or ISIS or whatever, they are worse than cancer. The only way you can have peace for the people of Gaza, the Gazan people, is to get rid of the cancer. And as long as there are few cancer cells left in Gaza, there will never be peace, not for Israel and not, sadly, for the people of Gaza. And that is what they're doing now. They're making a deal. What is the deal? We're going to stop the war. That is temporary peace. And what we're going to do, the Hamas want to have more and more of their prisoners from Israel. These are the leaders of Hamas. These are the new jihadi. For what reason? Oh, so we can have peace? No. You're kidding me. It's like my wife went to that surgery, and the same time doctor said, well, we're going to leave few pieces of cancer cell under her tongue because we're going to need them in the future. For what? The only way you can have peace is, first of all, as I said today in the afternoon program, that you acknowledge that Hamas is a jihadi organization and they are worse than cancer. We need to get rid of them. The only reason that the people of Gaza confess, we have sinned against you, we have sinned against Israel, please forgive us. No deal. You don't come hurt me and kill my people and kidnap the rest of them and make a deal to me free the rest of your jihadi out of my prison. This is ridiculous. That is foolishness. Which, by the way, get me in agreement with Dr. Andy is that Israel will never have peace with these people. We know the end of the story. We know how it's going to end. They will be alone. Maybe in the next 4 years under Trump, they will have some voice and they'll have some right. But believe me, in the long run, there will never be peace, and the whole world will surround Israel to go in the final war, and nobody will defend them except God Almighty.
Let's go to Dr. Lindstedt. Dr. Lindstedt, what do you make of this deal and everything has been set up to this point?
Well, as I talked to Israel and the break that we had, most of the people there are saying, really, the answer should be no. Usama is right. You got to get rid of the cancer. Otherwise, whatever you do, it's just a cover-up. And so I know we're pushing this deal because Biden has a week left, and he wants to claim, okay, I've made a peace. But Zechariah chapter 2, verse 8, it says, the nations who spoil Israel, he said, it's like touching the apple of God's eye. And so that's what they've done. And really, they're laughing at us, because they know how they negotiate. When you're negotiating, you never take the first offer. Hold your price. And our price should be every hostage has to be released. Next, the details that I'm reading, hopefully this is not true. Hopefully no one agreed to this. But I understand that we're going to be releasing, they're going to release a hostage, but 400 up to 400 terrorists could be released at one time before they release the rest of the first 7 hostages.
You got to be kidding me.
This
Are you serious?
No,
can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah. Right now, one of the proposals, and I don't know if this is the final form or not, but this is the form that's out there that I've read, is that Israel has to release all of the terrorists that they're going to do in round 1 before they release up to 7 of the hostages. This is not negotiation. Look, they're losing the war. This is why they want a deal right now. They're losing the war. Now's the time to be strong. Now's the time to say, you know what? We want every hostage. We want them right now. And you don't get one single terrorist until we get the hostages back. You touch the apple of God's eye, and sooner or later, God's going to bring judgment upon you. I really think that somehow there's got to be someone willing to say that. Look, it's not going to be a politician. A politician's got to get votes. Politician's got to satisfy everybody. But the truth is, as we talk here, the truth is this. These people don't honor their word. We just had a ceasefire November 27th. Did it stop the missiles and the things coming from Lebanon? The answer is no. They don't keep their word. They can promise anything and deliver nothing. So I really think it puts Israel in a very bad spot. The best you can hope for is to come up with a peace proposal that doesn't work, opens the door for the Antichrist. The best you can hope for is that they'll release some of the hostages, but they're not going to release them all. That's not victory. In other words, we're going to lose. We won the war, but we're going to lose because we're doing exactly what they want.
Opening the door for the Antichrist. I want to get to that with Dr. Woods, but first we have a clip from Joe Biden's State Department. Joe Biden. Logan, you have the clip where Joe Biden was asked by someone in the press who gets the credit for this. Do you have that clip, Logan? Play it, if you would, please.
Thank you. Who gets credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Yet, look at what his State Department said today, I think about an hour after him. Watch this.
To the involvement of President-elect Trump's team, it has been absolutely critical in getting this deal.
Whoa. What did he just say?
And it's been critical because...
What did he just say? The involvement, what? The involvement of President Trump?
To the involvement of President-elect Trump's team, it has been absolutely critical in getting this deal over the line. And it's been critical because, obviously, as I stand here today, this administration's term in office will expire in 5 days. And one of the things that we have always said about this deal is that when you get from stage 1 to stage 2, that the United States, Egypt, and Qatar are the guarantors of this deal. And Egypt and Qatar will push Hamas to stay at the bargaining table and to get from stage 1 to stage 2, and the United States will push Israel to stay at the bargaining table to get from phase 1 and phase 2. So obviously those are promises we cannot make on behalf of the United States for any longer than the next 5 days. And so it's critical that all of the parties to the agreement and the other mediators see that when the United States is in the room making commitments, those are lasting commitments that extend beyond this administration into the next one. I would just say, lastly, I don't know if it's unprecedented to have envoys from an outgoing and an incoming administration sitting at the same table negotiating a ceasefire agreement of this kind. But if it's not unprecedented, it's certainly unusual. And we, of course, thank the Trump team for working with this on this ceasefire agreement. We think it's important that they were at the table. And
Wow. There you go. So his own State Department says that Trump gets a lot of credit because Trump said, look, if the hostages aren't released before I come into office, there's going to be hell to pay. But Dr. Woods, they're not going to be released. Did you guys hear? I want to go really quickly back to Aaron. Aaron, did you hear that this is going to take place over 6 weeks? Over 6 weeks? And did you hear what just Dr. Rob said? You guys are going to release like 400 Islamic terrorists before you get many of your hostages back? This sounds like a complete setup.
It does sound like a setup, and I wouldn't be surprised if it is, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some breaking of the agreements, like that's the history of Hamas. But let's not forget who's coming to town. The new sheriff is coming to town, and here's something that none of us know. We don't know what is going on behind the scenes. For all we know, Trump, Netanyahu's he's not stupid. He's waged this war against the wishes of the Biden administration. I don't think he's afraid to stand up to Trump either. And yeah, it does look like he's cowering to both the outgoing and the incoming administration. But we don't know what has been said that is not made public. We don't know that Trump may be saying, let's go ahead with this. And then afterwards, we've got a few other ideas, plans. Let's hope that that's the case. I don't know. None of us know. It's gonna be a long, drawn out stage, painful. But our, like I said, our government is under threat, and that threat comes from people within the government who are saying, if the war does not continue after this hostage deal is over, then we will bring the government down. So there's a lot of case scenarios out there.
Let's go to Dr. Woods. Dr. Woods, Dr. Lindstedt said that this is all setting the stage for the Antichrist. Your thoughts, please?
Well, I agree with that. I agree with world events, not just this, but everywhere are setting the stage for the Antichrist. That's the prophetic season that we find ourselves in. But two quick ways in which that's happening. Number one, the Antichrist is going to confirm, and the Hebrew there is strengthen, confirm a covenant with the many. The many is Israel. Daniel 11 verse 33 says that, confirm a covenant with the many for 1/7. And we're getting this from Daniel 9 verse 27. So apparently there's going to be some sort of covenantal structure on the books that the Antichrist is going to simply step into history and strengthen. So any type of deal that Israel makes with anybody, in exchange for the illusory promise of peace, I think is part of that covenant structure that the Antichrist is going to strengthen. That's how I categorize also the so-called Abraham Accords as well. It's a kind of a covenantal structure that will be confirmed by the Antichrist. And then the second thing I'll point out, which I think this is opening the door for the Antichrist, is all of the anti-Israelism that we're seeing. I mean, as the details are becoming clear, this is a one-sided agreement with people, by the way, and the Western mind needs to understand this. This is not an art of the deal situation. We're not negotiating, a hotel deal, okay? This you're dealing with people that aren't operating with the same worldview that we have in the West. They are allowed to lie under what is called taqiyya in Islam to advance the cause. The Western mind doesn't understand that because we think when we sit down and deal with somebody that both sides are negotiating in good faith. So even though this is one-sided, it's going to get even more one-sided when the mere terms that Hamas is supposed to follow won't be honored either. And it's creating this climate of anti-Israelism all over the world, which the Antichrist, if I'm understanding Bible prophecy correctly, is going to take advantage of and gather the nations to war against Israel in the last days. So the anti-Israelism in it and the covenantal structure in it, I think, is opening the door for the Antichrist.
And Logan, I don't know if you can show some of the footage. I have some here, but maybe you could grab some. The footage like this is coming in from all over the world. But this is all over the Middle East, I should say. All over the Middle East. They're really celebrating. They feel like they've really got one over, I think, on Israel. And I think they probably have. I think they are winning. I think they're winning, at least in the public relations arena. And they've already won by how many Jews they've killed and how much they've disrupted. So in a lot of regards, I think the Islamists in the Middle East see themselves winning. Is Shahram Hadian with us? Shahram, born and raised in Iran, his daddy was high-ranking in the Iranian government, decided to get his family out about 5 to 6 weeks before the fall of the Shah, because even as a Muslim, his daddy, a beer-drinking, pork-eating Muslim, not very serious, obviously, if he's drinking beer and eating pork, but he's like, I'm not living under Sharia, okay? I'm not living under this. And he got his family out. So Shahram brings us the worldview of a former Muslim turned Christian and now pastor. Shahram, I think the Muslims are celebrating throughout the Middle East because they see themselves as having won in large respect. I think they have. What say you?
Brandon, listening to everybody's comments, I agree with that for a couple different reasons. I'm just making some notes as I was listening to the excellent commentary from Dr. Woods, Dr. Lindstedt, and Aaron, and I think I heard Usama there at the beginning. First of all, the Muslims, we have to understand, I believe, as part of this global system that we're seeing, that Antichrist system that Dr. Woods was talking about, I believe that the world is giving preferential treatment to Islam. I believe that is the preferential religion that is being lifted up above all else. We see this in the United Nations. We see this in Western Europe. We see this now in the West. We want to bend over backwards. Dr. Woods mentioned taqiyya, the idea of the permissibility of lying within Islam. There's also the permissibility when they're in the lower house of making an agreement, making a compact, making a pact, and then breaking it. And we know that the Antichrist is going to do this, correct? The Antichrist is going to break the 7-year covenant halfway through. So to everybody's commentary, I agree that there's nothing that's going to hold the Islamic world, Egypt, Qatar, and Hamas from breaking this. I think this is a horrendous agreement. We're talking about a ratio they're talking about of 40 to 1, approximately 40 to 1. So for every one hostage, we're going to release 40 convicted terrorists, up to 2,000 they're talking about. They're convicted of trying to kill Jews, correct? Yep. If they're in an Israeli prison, they're convicted of trying to kill Jews. And so that goes along with what Dr. Wood said with this anti-Israel, anti-Semitism that we see globally. And Brandon, one other thing that's setting up the door for the Antichrist system, and that is Trump's own words. right? Trump's own words when he commented on social media said that they're going to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure that Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. Well, that's going to happen again, because when you have Islam's goal is the eradication of the Jews. They believe that Jesus is going to come back and eradicate the Jews. He's going to kill all the Jews. So that's number one. And number two, he says that their peace through strength throughout the region is going to build upon the momentum of the expansion of the Abrahamic Accords. And the Abrahamic Accords are built on the false premise that Islam is Abrahamic. We all worship the same God. And this is spiritually deceiving the world and many Christians that are going to support Trump. So there's so many problems with this beyond the fact that I'm trying to find out, why would Israel agree to this? Why would they agree to such a one-sided ceasefire that's not a ceasefire, that's going to be broken, that is in pieces? They're only going to get 33 hostages at the front end. That's unacceptable. So those are just some of my initial comments, but you're absolutely right. Islam is not going to hold up to this agreement because their goal is the eradication of the Jews. There's no agreement here unless it's going to be the Antichrist agreement at some point down the road here.
And let's go back to that. Dr. Woods made the comment. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
No, something that Sham said made me think when he asked the question, why would Israel agree to this? Here's a thought. And because he mentioned about the Abraham Peace Accords, the Antichrist and all of that, when it comes to the Abraham Peace Accords, America and Israel, they want the Saudi Arabians to get on board, because economically this is going to be massive for all of these nations. Bibi Netanyahu, his main strength is actually in economy. He used to be the Minister of Finance. And I guarantee he also wants the Saudi Arabians to get on board of the Abraham Peace Accords. Now, the Saudi Arabians have made it clear they will not join in the Abraham Peace Accords unless there's a two-state solution. And I mentioned earlier that Donald Trump, as much as pro-Israel as he has been, he has always stood up for a two-state solution. So maybe that's what they're pushing, and maybe Netanyahu is compromising there. Many kings of Israel and Judah in the Bible, they were great kings, but they opened the door and compromised when it suited them. And maybe that's what Bibi is doing. I don't know. It's just a thought.
At one point, President Trump said something about the two-state solution. I think he said, I support whatever gives us peace. I'll pull the article up. I support whatever gets us to peace. Trump avoids backing his 2022 state solution offer. I support a plan of peace, and it can take different forms. That's what he told Time Magazine. I support whatever solution we can get peace. We can do to get peace. These are other ideas, or there are other ideas other than two-state, but I support whatever's necessary. Okay, so it sounds like depending on the day, one day he's not so sure that this two-state solution is going to work. The next day depends on who he's talking to, Benjamin Netanyahu, people in Saudi Arabia. So this tells me that as Christians, we need to really be praying for Donald Trump's discernment and really praying for Donald Trump to seek the advice of good people. It sounds kind of ridiculous to say it, but President Trump, anytime you want to talk, I know that Usama, Sharam, Dr. Lindstedt, Dr. Woods, my guy, Aaron, my guys would all be more than happy to brief you on the other things that maybe you don't know from a biblical prophetic standpoint, historical standpoint, that you may not be hearing from some of the people that have slipped into your soon-be administration. I pray that's not the case, but we've got to pray that he doesn't have these warmongers and other people slipping in who are really wanting to do what's best for the military-industrial complex, not what's in the best interest of Israel. I see you shaking your head, Usama. You agree with that?
Absolutely. And I just want to catch our attention to the fact that it's okay in Islam for a man to have 4 wives, but it's not for a wife to have 2 men as husband. You can dream about having Israel broken into 2 states and you have peace in that land, but that will never be, because if we agree on the 2 states in Israel, it will not even fit with the strong belief among the Muslims, because they believe in 1 state. It is the state of Palestine, or the Palestine. And that's the end of the story. You mean you just give them half of the land so they will take it for the time being to get the other half of the land. You make them stronger to put their foot on half of the land. And in Islam, we have this expression. You give a Muslim an inch, they go for a mile. Give him half of the state, not only will they will take the rest of Israel, take Europe and America with it. That is exactly their ultimate goal, because that's what they believe. That is in their ideology. No peace except when they're weak. Quran 47:35. Lies is permissible in Islam as long as you can put your foot inside the door. Now you're going to give them half of the land, or whatever size the state is. But in the long run, they will be in control of the whole country of Israel. And let me say it again, it's called Israel, not Palestine. Palestine ended 600 years before Christ, when the last Palestinians were taken out of this land to the land of Iraq. That was the end of Palestine.
Well, and their own Hamas charter, which again, people in America and most around the world don't know history, they don't know facts. Hamas's own charter calls for the elimination of Israel. The Palestinians, their own map does not include Israel, okay? So how do you have a 2-state solution with people that want you to be eradicated, that teach their children on television in the Gaza to kill the Jews? We have the videos.
That's why they're celebrating right now, Brannon. It's a victory to end the annihilation of Hamas leaders and gives them few hundred, if not few thousand, of these leaders of Hamas for taking half of their land, as they think, for the hope to get in the near future to the rest of the land. That's how they see it, as a victory, no more or less.
Yeah, Dr. Woods, you want to comment on this?
Well, let's just be clear. 2-state solution, I call the 2-state solution the final solution. And if you have any doubts about that, I'll tell you where their 2-state solution is. It's Gaza. That's the 2-state solution. That's an area, as everybody knows, southwestern portion of the Israeli map that the Israelis relinquished to the so-called inhabitants of Gaza in 2004. That was when that territory was controlled by the Israelis. It was beautiful beachfront property, botanical gardens, and once it was relinquished, they had one and only one election there, 2005. They elected Hamas, and ever since that point in time have used it as a beachhead for terrorist activity into the land of Israel, the launching of projectiles, and also the tunnels of terror. I was actually in Israel when a couple of Israeli school children, were kidnapped coming home from school, and it was those tunnels of terror coming through Gaza that allowed that to happen. And that it all reached a zenith and a climax in the events of October the 7th, 2023. So how's the 2-state solution working out for you? Not so well. And if it didn't work out for that small southwestern strip called Gaza, who in their right mind, using any type of logic or intellect, would think that surrendering that huge area, flippantly called the West Bank, better called Judea and Samaria, to the so-called Palestinians is going to lead to peace in the region? I mean, if the 2-state solution is practically the final solution in Gaza, why would you think surrendering that larger area would bring peace in the region? And I agree with all of the comments that have been made. These things are so because of the nature of Islam. Islam is not interested in, coexisting with the nation of Israel. They're interested in eradicating Israel.
Here's the map, the PLO map. Doesn't include Israel. This is
You know,
their
Brandon-
map. This is not something we made up. This is their map. You can validate that, right, Aaron?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to comment on what Dr. Andy was saying. I agree. Islam is not interested in peace with Israel. But see, Saudi Arabia, they are quite moderate, at least Mohammed bin Salman. And that's what in the building of this futuristic city, Neum, he wants this futuristic, modern, liberal city. And that's why he wants Israel. He wants to make negotiations with Israel as well. He needs Israel to help with that city. And so you've got a Muslim, or rather putting it a different way, you've got a moderate Muslim, he's willing to join into that peace. And this is where I see this deceit. This wolf how do you say it? Sheep.
A wolf in sheep's clothing. By the way, Logan,
Yeah.
this is Brannon Howse Live, not Worldview Radio. No, I agree with you 100%. There you go. Thank you, Logan. All right, let's go to this, folks. Look at this. Introduction, the Covenant of the Islamic Resistance Movement. This is Hamas, okay? This is who carried out October 7th. Our struggle against Jews is very great and very serious. It needs all sincere efforts. It is a step that inevitably should be followed by other steps. The movement is but one squadron that should be supported by more and more squadrons from this vast Arab and Islamic world until the enemy is vanquished and Allah's victory is realized. Okay? I mean, here's the 13th, Article 13, their own Hamas charter. Quote, there is no solution for the Palestinian question except through jihad. Initiatives, proposals, and international conferences are all a waste of time and vain endeavors, end quote. And every Islamist, every Hamas member knows this. They know that this deal is only about buying time. They have no desire for initiatives or proposals or international conferences. This is all to buy time, restock, get whatever warriors they can out. But the average American, an average person around the world, has no idea that Hamas was founded in 1987 by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is all over America, which about 80 to 90% of the mosques in America are run by Muslim Brotherhood, which is Hamas. They have no idea that CARE, founded in 1994, is just the nice smiley face, we're victims of Islamophobia crowd. They have no idea like Usama says, like to wear their ties and go on television, okay? And look like they're the peace-loving Muslim. That's CARE, they're the front group. So we have Muslim Brotherhood, started in 1928 in Egypt, where Usama's from. Then in 1987, we get their terrorist wing, Hamas. And then after a bunch of their recordings were overheard by the FBI in one of their meetings, they start to form a group called CARE to try to rehabilitate themselves and look like a bunch of victims. Do I have all that right, Usama?
Even the wording, what you read from Hamas, it is word for word exactly same writer of those who wrote the Holy Land Foundation which is called the strategic goal for Muslim Brotherhood in North America, which we discovered from the Holy Land Foundation trial. It is step by step. What they're trying to do in Israel is that's exactly what CARE would like to do here in America, and the rest of Hamas chapters, of course, because there are plenty of them here, over 30 of them, who are running in this country as a non-profit organization. They really have all the rights you and I have in our ministries. And until Mr. Trump acknowledged Hamas as a jihad organization, we know for sure, but the Muslim Brotherhood, which is more important, the mother of all these jihad organizations, they need to be acknowledged in this country, America, as a jihad organization, or otherwise, the result of that in the long run will be very harmful for America, for Israel, for the whole world.
Let's go back to this. Thank you, Usama. The Article 6 of the Hamas Charter says this. The Islamic resistance movement is a distinct Palestinian movement, which owes its loyalty to Allah, derives from Islam, its way of life, and strives to raise the banner of Allah over every inch of Palestine. That means every inch of Israel, folks. Now, by the way, just by way of your understanding, I'm reading from slides, okay? I was able to immediately do what you can do. I went into the vault at worldviewtube.com/vault. I went right to the library tab, and it brought down a list of menus, and then it brought up PowerPoints. I clicked it, started scrolling through my library of PowerPoints I've built over the years, Hamas in America. I downloaded it on my computer while these guys were talking and brought it up. So you guys wonder, how is it he grabs this data so fast while he's live on the air? Because I'm accessing my own vault where all this stuff is easily found. I have almost 500 slides. 500 slides with historic quotes like I'm giving you right now that are coming out of this presentation that's available to you as a member at worldviewtube.com/vault. So if you're like, where does he get this? How do I get that? I'm telling you, this is just a drop in the bucket of what we have at worldviewtube.com/vault. I hope you'll check it out. Here's Article 2 of the Hamas Charter. This is who Israel thinks are cutting a deal with. The Islamic resistance movement is one of the wings of Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. Hello. Did we just say that? Which constitutes the largest Islamic movement in modern times. Article 7. The Islamic resistance movement aspires to the realization of Allah's promise, no matter how long that should take. The Prophet Allah, bless him and grant him salvation, has said, the day of the judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, "O Muslim, O Abdullah, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him." Now, does this look like a group of people you can cut a deal with, as Dr. Woods was saying? This is, Shram, these are not people of goodwill. These are not people that in any way can you cut a deal with. The question is, when will the Antichrist show up and confirm some kind of deal? And I don't think it's writing a deal. I think it's a deal that, whether it's this one that comes up with Trump in power, or what was given when Bill Clinton was there, or Jimmy Carter, it'll be something that's already written that gets confirmed or strengthened according to the original language, as Dr. Wood points out. But this deal, even when it's done, is not going to be lasting. I don't know how long it'll last, a day, 2 days, I don't know. But at some point, a coalition of nations will come out of Ezekiel 38:39 and move against Israel and break this deal. You want to comment, Sharam?
Well, again, as we said, Brannon, the permissibility of their deception to both lie and to make deals is not only allowed in Islam, it is commanded in Islam. This is how they are to operate when they are seeking to get to a more powerful place. And in this case, as you've already so well established through Hamas's own charter and through what Islam is, you just quoted, Hamas just quoted Sahih Bukhari. Hamas just quoted the prophet of Islam, Muhammad, with the last hour will not come until the Jews will hide behind the tree and a stone, and every tree or stone will cry out. So they just quoted Islamic text, and we're establishing that any organization that is operating on behalf of Islam cannot be trusted. They will lie, they will deceit, they will make false deals. But I want to, if I can, just add one other element, because I keep sitting here thinking, why would Trump support this? Why would Trump support such a one-sided, horrible agreement that is not even immediately, like when I first read this, right, I thought, okay, they're going to immediately release all, 190, 211, depending on what number you look at. I'd love to know from Aaron, what is the exact number of the hostages? But no, we're going to do this in stages, and we're going to release, as Dr. Lynn said, several hundred terrorists first, and then 1,000. Here's another aspect that I want to maybe talk about, and that is, I believe that this is not just about the land that is we call Israel, but it is about Jerusalem. We know from the Bible, we know from Zechariah chapter 12, that Jerusalem is the cup of drunkenness that the nations are drunk on. It is the burdensome stone. When you go back, like Brannon, if this was really about the land, right? If this was really about two-state solution, then the Arabs that were in Gaza, and by the way, Ezekiel 23, the Lord, for all your listeners out there, I want something to be very clear. Gaza never belonged to the Arabs, and it never will belong to the Arabs, because in Ezekiel 23, God promises the boundaries of the Sea of the Philistines to the Red Sea, to the covenant with Abraham that he made for the land. The land covenant of Abraham is going to include Gaza. Gaza is going to belong to the Jews. to the covenant that God made with them, going all the way back to Exodus 23. But the Peel Commission, 1937, the Partition Plan, 1948. Did the Arabs were they not offered more than half the land? And why did they reject it back then? They rejected it because they wanted Jerusalem. And I think that the Abraham Accords, I think ultimately the Antichrist covenant is got to include some language on the Third Temple and the Temple Mount and Jerusalem. And I think that this is ultimately what this is leading in. If you listen to some of the leading Talmudic rabbis coming out of Israel, they believe that Trump could help them rebuild the Third Temple. Maybe this is an end to a means to that, where those in Israel are so desperate. Aaron said earlier, they're primed for deception. They're so desperate to rebuild that Third Temple. They believe that it's going to usher in the Messiah, that they go, look, whatever it takes to get these hostages back, we'll give it up. We know it won't work. We know there's no two-state solution. We know Islam will never be at peace. But that's just speculation. I'd love to hear,
All right.
if you want commentary from others. But
Absolutely. Okay, I'm glad you took us that route. Look at this. This is, I think, was given to me by Dr. Lindstedt. And it's a picture of the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount with what is a exact needed measurement of the temple, what will be the Third Temple, up on the Temple Mount. So it can be done. And of course, we have Nebraska, I think we have this faith center, don't we? Sharam?
yes, Oklahoma. It was in Oklahoma that they have the Tri-Faith Center, the House of One. They're all going to be worshiping the same God.
And that's Jews, Christians, and Muslims, right?
Correct.
And then they have one in the
United... let's not forget about Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't we have one in the United Arab Emirates as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so exactly, right? That what they call the Abrahamic family house.
Okay, so we already have the push for this ecumenicalism, which I said on Sunday night in my series as I'm teaching through the book of Revelation. You've already got mainstream evangelicals. I mean, John MacArthur. Yeah. I mean, his guy, Phil Johnson and James White, I mean, they attacked us like crazy for saying, hey, James White should not come to my town, Memphis, and do an interfaith dialogue with a Jew-hating, Holocaust-denying, Hitler-defending, jihadi preaching imam and think you can find common ground, which James White said at the beginning was the goal, not a debate, but common ground. And when we brought that up, Usama, Sharam, and myself, in June of 2017, we were lied about. You guys were called fakes and frauds. And we were lied about. My wife was attacked by Phil Johnson. One of Phil Johnson's guys in the mailroom. Some of these guys were putting out where I went to church, so I had to stop going to that church. And then, ironically, John MacArthur's guys wanted to know, well, where does House go to church? He doesn't go to church. Well, you idiots, you just put on social media where I went to church. After you knew, you had to have known that a guy from Saudi Arabia came into my conference threatening us. Sharam and I had 5 weapons, including 2 semi-automatics, and did 7 months in federal prison for it. So yeah, we're a little concerned about our safety. And then after you put out where I go to church, you then want to ask, where do I go to church? Because I quit going to that church. But these are the idiots out there in the evangelical world defending an interfaith dialogue. So I'm telling you, Satan is using much of the evangelical world, not just the mainline churches, for this interfaith dialogue. John MacArthur's own buddies are setting up the demonic Antichrist agenda for this very picture to take place. And when the rapture happens, and most of those guys, if that happens while we're in this day and time, most of those guys, I think, will still be left. Because I'm not sure a lot of them are believers anyway with their neo-Calvinist false gospel. But I'm telling you right now, this is why I wrote Religious Trojan Horse and the Coming Religious Reich. So we can't sit here, or other people can't point to the liberals or the mainline churches and say, oh, those guys are all doing the interfaith dialogue that's going to lead to that. No. John MacArthur's own guys, I think, are helping do this. Sharam?
Absolutely, Brannon. John MacArthur's camp is doing this. You mentioned James White with the push for interfaith ecumenicalism, attacking those who are warning people spiritually about Islam. Remember Justin Peters saying Islam is not a threat to Christians, spiritually speaking, which is absolutely false, absolutely naive and ignorant. but you have it also National Association of Evangelicals. You have it with the leadership of mainline denominations. They're pushing this ecumenicalism. They're pushing this Abrahamic faith. So when I see Trump in his statement, Brannon, bring up the Abraham Accords in relationship to, listen, like I'm looking at the evidence and I'm going, okay, why are you bringing up the Abraham Accords in regards to this ceasefire? What does that have to do with this? Well, if you read the Abraham Accords, first of all, it tells you that it is about the Abrahamic faith. It establishes that Islam is Abrahamic, which is false. Secondly, it was always backdoor negotiations for a two-state solution. So for, as Aaron said earlier, for the Saudis to jump on board, they're going with the line, well, we have to have a two-state solution. The so-called Palestinians have to have their own nation. Well, listen, let's give them land. Let's give them land in Jordan. Let's give them land in Egypt. Let's give them land in Qatar. Let's give them land in Saudi. Let's give them land. But yet none of those nations will invite one so-called Palestinian in. Meanwhile, they want Jerusalem. And the evangelical churches are so right now steeped in anti-Semitism. They're so right now steeped in replacement theology, and they're so right now steeped in a false understanding of Islam. They think Islam is an Abrahamic faith. We all worship the same God. Allah is the God of the Bible. All of this stuff that we've been warning about, we've been warning about for years, is now coming to fruition. It is like a perfect storm that is coming together, and it is priming not only Israel, but the evangelical world for this false peace. And again, I think that, as Dr. Rob said, when you look at the Temple Mount Institute and where they believe they can rebuild that temple, there's got to be some sort of a Abrahamic agreement, I think, for the Temple Mount to be shared and give Israel what they want, which is the third temple. And I say Israel, I don't necessarily mean governmental, but, spiritually speaking. So you're absolutely right. It all comes back to the culprit, the deception within the evangelical church that then fuels the rest of this stuff. And we're getting so close to that, it is overwhelming.
Yeah, well, and I think I'm about to shock a lot of you. And again, I'm not saying this to be critical of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a theologian, okay? He never claims to be a theologian, right? He doesn't claim to be, okay? And I didn't vote for Donald Trump or any other candidate out there because they're, quote, a Christian. Generally, I vote for guys because they're qualified. There are some born-again Christians I wouldn't want in position of being the president. Gary Bauer, nice guy, but I would never have wanted Gary Bauer to be president, okay? There's a lot of reasons I could say that. And he's one of many, not picking on Gary. He just didn't have the ability to be the president. So there are a lot of Christians I would never want to see be president. That's not their gift. I don't call a plumber because he's a Christian. I don't call an electrician because he's a Christian. I call a guy that's qualified. If he happens to be a Christian who's qualified, great. But that's not why I call my plumber or my electrician. Now, so none of this is a criticism. I'm not being personal against President Trump. I want him to be successful, okay? I want God to bless him. But some of you might be shocked at what I'm about to share because a lot of people don't know this. Look at what's going to take place at the inauguration. Okay?
I know it, man. I know it, Brannon. I'm just holding my tongue.
All right.
Yes,
Trump's inauguration, religious allies and new faces to offer prayers. Okie dokie.
A Shia good Muslim guy.
You got to have a rabbi. Okay. You're going to have, though, Imam, however you say his name, there at a Dearborn. You're going to have...
Imam Hisham is a nice, good Shia Muslim guy.
You're being sarcastic, aren't you?
No, it's just, I don't know why he's doing that. He didn't do it
but
first.
Isn't this guy known? Isn't he known for just saying some of the most... Isn't he the one that refused to call Hezbollah a terrorist organization?
That man, actually, if you read some of the material, he acknowledged himself as writing. He is another Osama bin Laden who just happened to be here in America for some time, I think from the 70s.
Well, here's Amy Meek. Who in Trump's team invited Hezbollah supporting anti-Semitic imam advocating jihad against America to the inauguration? Has anyone from Trump's team taken responsibility for recommending this guy? A man who documented ties to Hezbollah calls for jihad to deliver a benediction at Trump's second inauguration. How can we let a jihad speak at such a pivotal symbolic event. He has consistently refused to denounce Hezbollah, even during a contentious Hannity and Combs interview, which you guys can find online. I watched it the other night. Hannity asked him 3 direct questions. Is Hezbollah a terrorist organization? Is Ahmadinejad an anti-Semite for denying the Holocaust? What is your stance on terrorism? He refused to answer, instead accusing Hannity of provoking hostility and claiming the questions made God mad at you, Jesus mad at you, and the Prophet Muhammad mad at you. No denouncement, no accountability, just evasion. Hannity once held Democrats accountable for inviting this jihad to their convention. Why isn't he now demanding the same accountability from Trump's team in the RNC, which I will do, okay? And again, that's why you can trust our network and not Fox News, because those guys spend a lot of time kissing the ring of whoever's in power. I want Trump to be successful. I'm not being critical of Trump because President Trump, this is not his wheelhouse. It is mine. It is Usama's. It is Sharam's. It is Dr. Lindsted's. It is Aaron's. It's ours. And if President Trump, again, wants any of our advice and counsel as a kitchen cabinet on theological, biblical, worldview, eschatological, Middle East ideas, we'll give them to him. But I'm very worried about the people that are setting him up for failure. Usama?
I believe he is one of those who are maybe have the good heart, the good intention, but he is ignorant. And the problem of Mr. Trump, it's the problem of all evangelical churches in America. It is what Hosea told us in chapter 4, verse 6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Here is the knowledge. People need to read the Quran. If Mr. Trump have read the Quran, which, by the way, I know it is given to him in his hand by a friend of mine, this copy, which mine, and I have the picture proves that he have that copy, but he never read it. And so is most of these evangelical churches who are just naive people. I call them useful idiots because they are used by the Muslims. If it is James White or anybody else, even the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, what's his name? I can't even remember his name. J.D. Career, and others. I mean, they all do the same mistake. It's very simple. It is no knowledge about Islam, no knowledge about the techniques of Islam, the deception of Islam. And boy, oh boy, if somebody can read the first 9 chapters of the Quran, within 3 hours, he can figure out what Islam is all about. And God help us, because once again, if we don't have knowledge, we'll be destroyed from within.
Well, here's this guy, my Jewish friend Daniel Greenfield, who's a regular guest here, says in this clip that the imam who's going to pray at President Trump's second inauguration appears to warn Christians away from believing in Jesus, quote, stay away from this infidelity, end quote, and tells them to become slaves to Allah.
ونزهونا عن الألوهية نحن عباد مكرمون وحينما نصلي في صلاتنا نقول وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ولكن دع عنك الخوض في القرآن وارجع إلى كتابك إن كنت مسيحيا وأسألك سؤالا واحدا وأرجو أن تجيبني إياه هل أن عيسى خالق أم مخلوق؟ أحب أن تجيبني عن هذا السؤال ولا تنسى ولكن أقول بأن الذي يعبد الإنسان نحن نتشرف بعبادة الرحمن كلنا عباد للرحمن لقد جاء قالت اليهود عزير بن الله وقالت المسيح والنصارى المسيح ابن الله ونحن نقول أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرجعنا العبودية إلى الله الواحد الأحد يا أخي من هو ربك أليس الله الواحد الأحد ومن هو رب موسى وعيسى.
All right, now I let that go so you could read it, but that's Arabic. And I wanted you, Doc, to tell me if this is propaganda on the part of Daniel Greenfield and myself, or was he in Arabic saying what he's accused of saying?
He is very simple, have a great message to worship Allah, the only one. And he's emphasizing in his question to say that you answer this question. Was Isa son of Mary? He meant obviously Jesus. Was he created or creator? You worship human, we worship Allah, and we are the servant of Allah. Therefore, he's calling all the people to worship Allah and stop worshiping Jesus because he's just a created being like any other prophet, like any other messenger. And he has the boldness to teach that, but in the same time, he's going to bless Mr. Trump for the White House for the next 4 years. God help us.
Well, here's
what happened to Trump's brain?
Well, he's not got some of the best people around him when it comes to specific areas, right? He needs specific people around him. Dr. Lindstedt, what are your thoughts on that?
Brother,
Yeah.
up to yesterday, I was begging God to give me opportunity to meet with Mr. Trump. After hearing this news today, I am giving up on it. He will meet with the Muslims, but he will not will meet with anybody like us here in this panel to speak the truth.
Dr.
I hate to say
Lindstedt? Dr. Lindstedt?
Well, if we keep score on where we are, I know in the last 24 to 48 hours, Saudi Arabia twice has mentioned the two-state solution is the way that they're going to go. They're going to push toward that. I think they're willing to trade for that. Israel coming back up on the Temple Mount. But in my mind, the two-state solution, Israel loses. The hostage deal we've talked about, Israel loses, releasing terrorists for a few of the hostages. In terms of public opinion, Israel loses, because if they continue the fight as they must do to keep their government going, the government has said, we'll fight once this ceasefire is done to get the hostages. In the public opinion, now people are going to say, wow, Israel's the aggressor. Israel loses. In terms of restocking, this provides a great chance to restock. Israel loses. The only thing that is accomplished is that the whole world has moved toward exactly what the Bible said would be the conditions that will welcome an Antichrist. And so all that's taking place, it's because these people don't have a biblical worldview. Their worldview is very different. And I really think that we're watching God move toward catching the church out, move toward having the nations come against Israel. It's an exciting time to determine saying that the Bible is being fulfilled. But I shudder for those that think that this is going to accomplish peace, because the Bible said when they say peace and safety, there will be sudden destruction.
Look at this here, folks. Israel plans to release 30 terrorists for each civilian hostage and 50 terrorists for every military hostage, according to Reuters. This is just not a good deal. All right, who wants to take this one? We had lightning strike the U.S. Capitol on New Year's Eve. Lightning strike the United States, the Washington Monument on New Year's Eve. We have the video of all of it. Lightning strike the Empire State Building, and lightning strike World Trade Center Building 1. All four buildings, historic buildings, struck on New Year's Eve. I did a program. I said, look, I'm not going to be dogmatic, but I believe that if you look in the scripture, you can see a lot of connection between God's judgment, his character, his holiness, his nature, but certainly judgment, and the warning and pronouncement of judgment with lightning. And I guess what I was saying in the very first days of 2025 was, America, I'm concerned about the spiritual direction we're going, that we're going to see God's continual removal of protection upon us. And if we think we can somehow unite and have a kumbaya with people that worship Allah, which is Satan, because the description, as Sharam and Yusam have taught us, the description of Allah in the Quran and the description of Satan in the Bible, they're identical. And so if you think that you're going to have a kumbaya and have Franklin Graham pray and have an Islamist pray, I mean, this is a problem. Now, again, I have no problem working with people who have a different theology and doctrine on what Francis Schaeffer called co-belligerence, to stop abortion, but I cannot come together and have a spiritual kumbaya. So I'm concerned that all of this is setting the stage, Dr. Woods, for a very tough 2025 if we can't start out getting right on these issues. And I also believe that Israel is setting themselves up for a very tough 2025. Dr. Woods?
Yeah, I would agree. And the thing to understand is this whole scenario has already happened. When Obama was elected, Rick Warren got up and prayed at, I think, an inaugural event.
He did.
And he mentioned the English word for Jesus, the Spanish word for Jesus, Jesus.
But it's the Arabic,
and then he
brother.
mentioned
Isa, or Issa.
Yeah, well, I'm getting there. And then he mentioned the Islamic name for Jesus, Isa. And that was kind of the, beginning of the Obama years. That's how everything was kicking off in that time period. And look what we got for 8 years. So, I'm not real happy at all with this imam, particularly someone of this ilk, this radical, praying for a president at an inaugural event. I mean, the whole thing, sets a bad precedent.
Well, who is
And
it
the other
that
thing
elected
is-
Donald Trump? Who is it that funded Donald Trump in his campaign? Was it the Islamists?
Well, I think
Was it the Islamists,
Well,
or was
that's
it a lot of evangelical Christians, and maybe some very wealthy Jews? What do you think, Dr. Woods? Because again, I don't understand why that character's up there. I don't see that as a big group that went and voted for him. I don't care what the press tells you or what the RNC tells you. The Muslims did not run out in mass numbers and vote for him. So why is his rear end up there? You know, he can. I don't understand, Dr. Woods.
Well, they say that the two-state solution is, Minnesota and Michigan, because he had to carry those to win, and those are heavy, Islamicized states, as everybody knows. So I don't know. Maybe this is some kind of payback to them. I remember when he was elected and he nominated Huckabee. They were very upset that someone that's as Zionistic as Huckabee would, be elevated to that kind of position in the cabinet. Maybe it's some kind of payback to them to tell them, hey, I'm still on your guys' side, even though I put Huckabee in a place of prominence. That could be a possibility.
Listen to what Bill Clinton had to say. I played this a few weeks ago, but it's so stark, and I'll let you guys all comment as we get ready to wrap on this topic tonight. Such an esteemed panel. Listen to what Bill Clinton, I don't often agree with Bill Clinton, but he got this one right.
Look, I think what's happened there in the last 25 years is one of the great tragedies of the 21st century. And when I tell the young people, for example, who are understandably in America, let's say they're super sympathetic with the Palestinians, well, they've been killed, a lot of those Palestinians have, and all they know is a lot more Palestinians have been killed than Israelis. And I tell them what Arafat walked away from. And they can't believe it. I said, oh yeah, he walked away from a Palestinian state with a capital in East Jerusalem, 96% of the West Bank, 4% of Israel, to make up for the 4% that the settlers occupy that were beyond the borders in the 67 or more. And I go through all the stuff that was in the deal, and they it's not on their radar screen. They can't even imagine that happened. And I tell them, the first and most famous victim of an attempt to give the Palestinians a state was Prime Minister Rabin, whom I think loved as much as I ever loved another man. And so Rabin, he dies, and then Shimon Peres is defeated in the election, and where the rest of it is history. But you walk away from these once-in-a-lifetime peace opportunities, and you can't complain 25 years later when the doors weren't all still open and all the possibilities weren't still there. You can't do it. It's just...
Your voice just cracked when you said that.
Yeah. I'm an old guy. I have my regrets.
He seemed to get a little emotional there, Dr. Lindstedt, talking about Rabin, did he not? I want Aaron to comment.
Yeah, he sure did. I had the privilege of meeting with Mr. Rabin, and I saw a man who turned from, I'm going to say, a hawk to a dove. And I watched how he changed his whole philosophy. It was a sad day for Israel, to be honest, when that happened. But I think Bill Clinton saw the real truth of the Arafat regime in that he wanted everything. And so, and of course, this is a man who won the Nobel Peace Prize. What a joke that turned out to be. Now the President Medal of Freedom, they're a joke. We're watching people compromise principled positions, and it just can't be done. If you're really going to be a leader, you got to stand for the truth. You got to stand for what's best for your country. And we're watching people compromise so much because they want to say, okay, we've accomplished this, we've done this. you're right. We need to pray for President Trump that he will get good advice, because this definitely is not a good situation for either Israel or America.
Closing comment from each of you. Let's go back to the big widescreen. Aaron, what are your thoughts on everything we've been saying as a guy right there on the ground?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Saudi Arabia. I've got my eyes on them definitely with the Abraham Peace Accords, them coming in. Saudi Arabia, that's where Islam began. They want to rise up again, I believe, and be the number one ruler in the Islamic world, with this vacuum now that Iran has been pushed out, Syria. Keeping my eyes on Turkey as well, and their threats. They threatened Israel today to leave Syria. Who would have known? Less than a month ago, Syria was still intact, and Syria has fallen. I've heard reports that Jordan are next, Brannon. So what a changing world, what fascinating days we're in. We need to blow the shofar. We need to be on alert and warn the saints to be the same.
So I agree. And then, of course, we throw in Iran. I mean, it looks like Israel's going to strike Iran. There is now some, we quoted a guy yesterday that's an expert in the area saying these bunkers, their system, their nuclear system is so deep underground, 800 meters, 2,000 feet or something like that, that what they're going to have to do instead is go around and kill all the nuclear scientists and everybody. So if Israel and Trump go around starting to kill with covert operations, all of a sudden these guys start dying, like the pagers, happen with some of those terrorists this last year. What does this do to this deal? Is this all of a sudden stop the deal? I mean, is the deal off? Aaron?
Yeah, good question. These are big questions. We're going to watch it all unfold, and we have to be patient when we have to go through these next 42 days here in Israel. It's going to be a rocky road, I'm predicting. I think it's going to be very painful, frustrating, and I just hope there's no dangerous curveballs in there, like a collapsed government or an assassination attempt or success. I don't know. Time will tell.
Anyone else want to make a closing comment?
I will do it quickly here, Brennan. It's been 1,450 years since Muhammad claimed to be a prophet in Mecca. And all these years, we never heard Islam to have any ties whatsoever to peace. So why today we're talking about peace between the greatest two enemies to one another, the Jews and the Arab and the Muslim? I'm not saying that the Jewish are enemy, but the Muslims consider the Jews to be the worst enemy. Not one Arab country, not one Muslim country would love to host one Palestinian, I call them Gazans, the Muslims who are not Arabs, who are not Palestinians, in their countries. So why do you expect there will be peace between the worst people among the Muslims, where no Muslim likes them, and the Jews? The matter of fact, I believe the only reason why the Muslim world are excited to have a relationship with Hamas or Hezbollah or any other jihadi, it is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We Egyptians, for example, do not like the Palestinians, and we'll have nothing to do with them, except if the Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt, like the rest of the Muslim world, will send aid to the Palestinians or to Hamas to kill some Jews for us. Wow, what a great way to see it. Muslims have always killed Muslims from the days of Muhammad until today. The history of Islam can be summarized as one sentence: a gushing river of blood. And I don't think these Muslims who hate each other that bad one day will have peace with Israel. We're going to force Israel to make that peace deal, which is actually a loss. I could not see any positive of that agreement. And it will be just temporary until the Muslims will have the upper hand once again, and they will strike against Israel. But this time will not be just some people called Hamas, but next time will be Muslim who will be united to go in war against Israel.
Shahram, closing comment?
Three quick thoughts, Brannon, if I could. One, first of all, Iran. You mentioned Iran here. I do think that the regime in Iran is weak. And I do think for multiple reasons, including the fact that, again, the Iranian people, the majority of the Iranian people are done with Islam. They're done with 46 years of horrible, evil oppression. And I think that the regime is also very much right now reticent of now Israel's ability to strike assassinations. So I think that's putting a chill in their striking. Somebody emailed me today and said, when is Iran going to strike Israel? They kept saying they're going to strike. And I think, like you said, it's going to be the other way around. But it's going to be tactical with what you're saying. I think the assassination route is putting a chill. But the people of Iran, remember, support Israel. They support America. Number two, we are now in a different era in America politically, Brannon. It's the big tent. The Republicans are naive and deceived about Islam. They're not going to go after the Muslim Brotherhood. I think that ship has sailed. And Trump won Dearborn, and they claim that that's why he won Michigan. So there is probably within the camp, if not him directly, within the camp, there is a sense of being beholden to the Muslims. And this is a new era of the so-called Big Tent Republican Party, one which is terrible for America. Ultimately, I'm very leery of this populism. And finally, let us pray for the church that Christians would not be deceived by these end-time deceptions, that they would remain faithful to the gospel, to the word of God, to the truth, that this would not be an hour that we would fall, the remnant at least would fall for these things. And that's what we continue to do, what we're doing. That's why I appreciate your platform as well, that it is a platform that is going to go wherever the truth leads, even if it means you're going against the tide. So let's pray for great wisdom and discernment in these hours. And I so appreciate these other brothers that are on the program today.
Thank you, Shahram. Dr. Woods, did you get a closing comment yet, Dr. Woods?
Not yet, but just real quickly, that clip you played earlier of Clinton, the key words in the whole thing are East Jerusalem.
Yeah, I heard that.
He gave Arafat East Jerusalem. Well, that's why Arafat walked away from the deal, because he's not interested in East Jerusalem. He's interested in Jerusalem because of the misguided Islamic teaching. Of course, Jerusalem doesn't even appear in the Quran, but in their minds, they think that Jerusalem is a holy site. It's where Muhammad ascended back to Allah on a steed named Barak, and they look at it as their third holiest site, even though when you watch them pray on the Temple Mount, their rear ends are towards Jerusalem because their face is towards Mecca and Medina, their first two holiest sites. But at any rate, in their minds, Jerusalem is their third holiest site, even though the word Jerusalem does not appear in the Quran. It appears about 800 times in the Bible, but not a single time in the Quran. And until that belief is changed, you're not going to have lasting peace in the Middle East, and you're going to keep having scenarios that Bill Clinton faced with Arafat, who was given the deal of a lifetime and yet walked away from it because of those two words, East Jerusalem.
Well, let's hear real quick what, in closing here, what Marco Rubio, who had hearings today as Secretary of State, had to say about Hamas. Let's hear what he had to say.
Hamas carried out an atrocious operation. They sent a bunch of savages into Israel with the express and explicit purpose of targeting civilians. They went into concerts. They went into these music festivals. They knew that there were no soldiers at the music festival. They knew that these were teenagers and young families, that they went into different communities and the kibbutzes and the like, and they deliberately targeted civilians. Deliberately. It was in fact, they kidnapped the ones they didn't murder, the families who they didn't eviscerate, the people whose skulls they didn't crack open. They kidnapped, and to this day continue to hold people innocents that they took a deliberate operation. In the case of Israel, responding to that attack has had to go after Hamas. How can you coexist? How can any nation state on the planet coexist side by side with a group of savages like Hamas? They have to defend their national security and their national interest, as I pointed out in my opening statement. And so there is no more, and they didn't target civilians. Now, sadly and unfortunately, and I'm sure we'll discuss it further, some of the other questions that will come up here today, one of the horrible things about war, it's a terrible thing about war, and it's why we should try to prevent it at almost any cost, is that innocent people are caught up in it. And that's true of every conflict on the planet. But there is a difference between those who, in the conduct of armed action, deliberately target civilians, and those who do as much as they can to avoid civilians being caught up, against an enemy that doesn't wear a uniform, against an enemy that hides in tunnels, against an enemy that hides behind women and children and puts them at the forefront and uses them as human shields. That's who Hamas is. There is no moral equivalency.
And yet the rockets keep coming in, Aaron. Even as we're talking, my red alert just went off.
I know, it's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many of you have the red alert on your phone, but literally while we're talking, a rocket just came in. It was going into Naram.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, this is really an incredible time. Just as we've been on the news, not only have rockets come in, I have the same alert on my phone, but as well, there's pictures showing terrorists coming out of the tunnels in Hamas celebrating victory. In their mind, they have just had a victory because of how the terms are coming. So as we watch the Bible being fulfilled, I guess the thing I come away with is, number one, to pray for the leaders. And next, I think this is going to be a great time to win souls. If people could hear what we've discussed, if people could see that really this is a setup for the tribulation to begin. Before the tribulation begins, Christ comes back for the church. I think there would be people that would get right with Christ and maybe come and accept him as Savior for Christians to be ready, because the Lord's coming. He's not slack concerning his promise, and he's going to come. And I think we're at the brink of that.
Well, it certainly set the stage for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled. Some strong man to come on the scene that will confirm a peace treaty. And then there will, after that peace treaty, that false peace of that first seal broken, as has already been referenced, God hands that seven sealed scroll. God hands it to the Lord, and the Lord begins to break those seals. The first one, of course, is that revealing of the Antichrist and his false peace. Then the second is war. He even has to. Daniel tells us he has to go to war to rip out three of these, nation confederates, kind of a European Union, North American Union. He's got to rip three of them out by their roots in order to get his own New World Order in. So he has to go to war. The Antichrist has to go to war himself after being this person of peace in the first seal. The second seal, he goes to war, rips out three of the leaders by their roots to get his New World Order. And then, of course, after war, you have famine and plagues and pestilence and all that starts to roll down. But we're waiting on that first breaking of the first seal by the Lord himself, which will then release all these actions to take place, which means we're now looking for some guy that will show up on the world scene, claiming he can bring peace, and then confirm some kind of peace treaty that will last maybe a day, maybe a few hours, who knows? And then, of course, we know we have Gog, Magog, Ezekiel 38, 39. Does anyone disagree with that?
Well, I would just not disagree with it, but I would add this emphasis. As Christians, we are not looking for Antichrist.
That's right.
We're looking for Jesus Christ. And we're, Titus 2:13 tells us that he's our blessed hope. I mean, yes, the Antichrist is going to come on the scene, but our understanding is before he does, Jesus is going to come and take his own to heaven in an event called the rapture. And just as, Christmas lights and Christmas songs tell me that Christmas is near, they also tell me that Thanksgiving is coming even faster.
Yeah, exactly.
So these signs of the tribulation that we're watching, that shows us that the rapture of the church is coming even faster. And as Dr. Lindstedt said, I can't think of a better time than to get right with the Lord, by trusting in his provision, for the forgiveness of our sins.
Amen to that. And of course, when I talk about collectively, we're waiting, I'm talking about humanity. Humanity is waiting now for these things to start unfolding. And in one sense, we too as Christians, because I think as John the Revelator is laying these things down, I think in some sense, even those of us who I think will be in heaven at this point will have a keen idea of what's going on. At least, of course, we even know that one of the seals is those who have been martyred, the believers who have been martyred during the tribulation are crying out, "Oh Lord, how long before you avenge our death?" And he says, "Here's your white robes. Just wait a while." So even folks in heaven seem to appear to have an understanding of where we are on God's prophetic calendar. And I think we will as well. What a fascinating conversation. You know, I don't know of any other news network out there that will have a panel like this, say the things we've said, present the truth we have, talk about the gospel, Bible prophecy, the news. There's not another network like this. Would you guys all agree?
Yeah, and Brandon, real quick, I was watching one of the other networks the other night. They had a well-known actor on there, and he was talking about the California fires, and he started to draw a connection between Gavin Newsom and the World Economic Forum, and the moderator immediately interrupted him.
Who was that? Was that Dennis Quaid? Was he interviewing Dennis Quaid or who?
No, it was Sean Hannity on Fox interviewing a famous actor. His last name is Gavi, I believe.
And Sean Hannity cut him off. Well, you know that Sean Hannity has bragged about his close buddy relationship with Gavin Newsom, right?
Yeah, but my point is, you know, I said to my wife that would never happen on WVW.
Nope, sure wouldn't. We wouldn't cut him off. We would say, yeah.
Here's the challenge. And here's the challenge. I wish for any of the other channels to give somebody any rights to read one verse from the Quran. Just one verse. For one saying of Muhammad. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, they won't read a verse.
Aaron? Small channels, when I went speak, small radio station said, we cannot talk about the Quran. We cannot talk about Muhammad. We cannot talk about Islam. So why do you even want to have me on your show? What do you mean you cannot? That's what all I am about.
That's like having Martha Stewart and telling her she can't cook. Aaron?
About 3 days ago, 5 of our top soldiers and top units were murdered and they died in battle. One of them was a Messianic believer. And just above the Sea of Galilee in an area called Perea, they had his funeral and they showed it on television. And I heard some stories. I knew some people that went to the funeral, and they really shared the gospel message. So, you know, people are hearing the gospel even through, or sadly, through tragedies like his death. The other thing I just wanted to remind the viewers is some of those early captives that are going to be released. One of them is a 9-month-old baby. Well, at least she was 9 months old on October the 7th. And another one was a 3-year-old. And so, you know, there's, in spite of the negative feelings that it may not be the greatest deal, there's going to be a lot of emotion, and hopefully it'll bring some healing as well to our nation. So we're kind of looking forward to getting our beloved ones back.
And of course, we're going to show that footage and we're going to celebrate that. You know, we may not agree with the terms of the deal, but boy, we are going to celebrate those images, that video. We absolutely are going to do that here. Let's go around. Aaron is lighttothenationsministry.com, lighttothenationsministry.com. Rob Lindstedt is BibleTipNow.org, BibleTipNow.org, BibleTipNow.org. You'll find a lot of free downloads that understand a lot of what we've been talking about there. Usama is thestraightway.org. There you can order his Quran, which he translated from Arabic into perfect English with no whitewashing, thestraightway.org. Dr. Woods, he is AndyWoodsMinistries.org, AndyWoodsMinistries.org. We, by the way, carry Dr. Lindstedt's program every day. We carry Dr. Woods' program on Saturday and Sunday. And then Shahram Hadian, we carry him on Saturday and Sundays. His website is, he's changed it, but I think it's Truth and Love Ministries, Truth and Love, TLministry.com, which stands for Truth and Love, TIL Ministry, TILministry.com. Gentlemen, thank you so much for covering this big international breaking news story tonight.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Brannon.
Thank you, guys. Let's go real quick to the Dolly cam because she's been, she just woke up when she heard her name. There she is. She takes every morning a scoop of Gatatana, as do I. A scoop of Gatatana, and they can, as do I. You guys can turn the, there you and go. They can, you guys can turn the, there you go. She's been napping. She gets her Gatatana every day, half a scoop. Folks, if you go and look up what phytoplankton does for dogs, my wife has been reading me articles on how great this is for your dog. Now, she only gets a half a scoop, okay, of the Gatatana. I take a whole scoop. My wife was reading me this morning. Boy, she's going to wake up here. My wife was reading me this morning all the great things it does and all the people that were talking about their older dogs that now have the energy. They're acting like puppies again, how great it is for fighting cancer. So many people are commenting on their personal testimony on how it's helping their dog fight and get rid of cancer and helping their joints and so many other things. So again, folks, if you have a pet like I have, Dolly, Lily, Pearl, get the Gatatana. Melissa Howse, GPA.com. You can order a box. I order just a box and I just give her a half a scoop every day and I take the scoop. Okay. In fact, I have mine right here in the studio that's been brought to me. So I drink it every day. And if you scroll down the page there, you'll see it's got 5 clinical trials you can read about. You can also, again, get the brand that is for pets if you want. There's the cat that had the tumor, now it's gone. But you don't have to. You can just order the regular Gatatana like I do, and your pet can take a half a scoop of that. So go ahead and get that, folks. It is so good for you as well. So good for you. My wife has been having a lot of sciatic nerve problems, but she was telling me today about how much better they are since adding not only Bella Grace, but Gatatana, getting the right nutrition, setting the right nutrition is so important for us. And again, this is one of the 3 things I take every day: my Bella Grace, my Numi, and my Gatatana.